Hey, hello. I'm Eileen Abels. I'm the Dean of the School of Library and Information Science at Simmons College. And I'm thrilled to be here today to have a conversation with Amy Ryan. Amy is our advisor in residence at Simmons SLIS, and she's going to be working with students on a variety of activities as well as with our faculty and others at Simmons. Amy has over 35 years of public library experience, most recently as the president of the Boston Public Library. Before BPL, she was director of the Hennepin County Library in Minnesota. She now serves as chair of the Board of Directors of the Digital Public Library of America and is also a member of the MIT Libraries Visiting Committee. Today, our conversation will focus on the future of libraries. Hi, Amy. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So I thought we could start with some general questions. One is, are libraries becoming obsolete in the face of the internet?
Well, I think libraries have never been more essential as people turn to libraries in droves. And I think the importance is that the library services are multifarious. So it's everyone from people seeking new careers to English language learning to early literacy. And also I think the importance of the public library and all kinds of libraries is a community gathering place too. So I know the numbers are up across the country for library usage. At the same time, Eileen, I think librarians have to be vigilant that we do guard against obsolescence and we do keep pushing and providing innovative services.
So that leads me to another question related, and one that comes up often, which is how can we communicate clearly how important we are? Because I think we know that we're important, and I think some of the users know, anybody who's using us will know we're important, but we have to communicate beyond that, right?
I think that is a challenge. And I think we have to be mindful across the board in libraries, not just in the communications department, but how people really teach, learn, think, create, disseminate information is evolving. It's very different. And I think we have to think about our audiences, and I think we have to then target the message mindfully to that audience. So the teen audience is going to get a far different message than the senior citizens. So I think we have to be very mindful of that, and I think that we also have short-shrifted across our profession, marketing and communications. And I think that's the way to really put our message out.
That's an interesting, as an aside, we've been working on the future of library and information science education, as you know, because you've been working with us. And at a recent meeting at the New Hampshire Library Association, we asked, what do you think your employees of the future are going to need? What should we be preparing? And they said, we need people who know how to market.
Right.
And they said, not just a quick course, we need really know how to market. So that's interesting. Would you mind reflecting back and thinking of things that have changed? So you're talking about how we don't want to be obsolete, but what have you seen as shifts as might be good examples?
So when I started in public libraries 35 years ago, at the reference desk, I would look up from the Minneapolis Public Library reference desk and see a sea of faces. And everyone was after the librarians to supply them with one answer. The phone would be ringing, people would be there, we'd be looking through statistical abstract. Now the paradigm has totally shifted. People are still coming, but they're not all going to the reference desk. The librarians have turned into information navigators to help them kind of navigate through a million hits on the internet and to really become more mentors to the teens and more teachers to people in the branches. And I think that's a great change. It's interactive, it's promoting self-sufficiency, and it really is realizing the potential of what a library has to offer.
So in terms of those changes, I do have questions, but I'll jump around a little. So what do you see those changes having on the physical library building, and also just changes in general as you envision that?
So I think it's so important for the library profession just to be mindful that libraries serve the community either online, in buildings, or through outreach. So they have to meld together, but the in-building experience is essential to communities. So I think when you think about that, you think about what's your program, what do you want to offer in this library? What's the ratio of books to computers to early literacy space? I think you figure that out by turning to the community and to the audience, and then to assembling just the smartest people that you know. And then also, I think buildings that are designed creatively really call on other buildings, like the Apple Store or the MFA or something, not just like look at other libraries. So I think that as services evolves, the libraries have to reflect that and be flexible.
So what are some new uses of space that you've seen or that you would imagine for the future?
Well, you know, there's a few. In terms of branch libraries, what Boston Public Library has done over the past several years is allocate the space 30-30-30. So adults get 30%, children get 30, and teens get 30. That's very different from how it was even 15 years ago when the adults, because they're running the show, they get like 80% of the space. Kids maybe get 15, and teens, you know, get like what's left over, a corner. So we really shifted that around at East Boston. And so we thought about that, the 30-30-30, and then it works out great because kids feel honored and valued. And so I think that's an important piece. I think when you're building a central library, you look at how you can highlight your collections, your rare book treasures, exhibitions, digital signage and digital content. And then at Boston Public Library, they're moving ahead on a partnership with WGBH and a restaurant, because for a retail to add to the experience of visiting the library. And then of course there's the maker spaces and all of that. I mean, libraries have never been more interesting.
So what does that mean for the skill set that our students graduate? And also, it sounds like there's a wide, you just mentioned from rare books and special collections to maker spaces. So what do you recommend in that aspect?
You know, I really value people who are curious thinkers, who are active in the community, who learn from other stores, colleges, libraries, and then think, how would that work in my environment? And to talk to people who don't look the way they do, and to assemble a team that includes librarians, non-librarians, people from the public, and really draw upon the expertise of a number of different experts.
So what do you think in terms of the skill set, so skills and attributes? And what have you been looking for as you selected librarians, and what do you think in the future someone or you might be looking for?
So Simmons is a highly regarded library science program. And when I was interviewing people over my whole career, if they came from Simmons, that would be like the gold standard. That was, okay, so we trust that they will have the background and the professional expertise. So then to put it on top of that, I think I looked at people who are creative in terms of technology. I look at people who have an outgoing personality in terms of dealing with whoever the constituency is. For public libraries, people have to understand and appreciate the public nature of a public library, and they have to like service. And also, I think they have to be willing to take risks, you know, and I don't know as a profession if that's our strong point, but I think that that's a big part of it too.
So in a way, I think that gets back to who we attract into our programs too, right? And I think, how can we build that in? I mean, this isn't a question that has an answer, that we can, so that students are willing to take risks and that students are looking toward the future and thinking and be willing to change. Change is difficult, and I think people have some trouble with that. But what would you expect a student to be able to learn on the job as opposed to what we would be teaching them?
I think what you learn on the job is the sociology of decision making and what goes into making an effective decision, whether you're the decision maker or whether you are participating in that. I think that takes a while. I think it also takes a while to figure out how you work with people you might not choose to work with, but, you know, that's the situation. And how the strengths and weaknesses need to complement each other. I think you learn on the job about some of the financial resources. And I think that's one thing that if library science students kind of shore up on that, that would be a good thing. I think you also have to learn some of the political nuances depending on your environment and what messages that you carry forward. So there's a lot you learn on the job, and I had a very wonderful mentor, and I think that really helps people if they can kind of keep their eye on someone either consciously or unconsciously.
And that was on the job, a mentor
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
workplace.
on the job, yeah.
Yeah, I think some of our faculty continue to stay in touch with students
Yeah, that's good, yeah.
over time, and it's a different type of mentoring there. But I think one of the concerns that we had and at that forum that we held was how do we keep the faculty up on these changes too? Because in order
Right.
for us to be preparing our students for the future and our graduates, we have to stay up on that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, what I've noticed at Simmons is that the students are incredibly bright and that it's an interactive learning environment that I've been, in the few meetings I've been in, the faculty and the students seem to teach and learn simultaneously. So what better teacher than a student and vice versa? So I think that's important. I also think that just keeping in touch with colleagues around the world now. And I've always learned a lot from architects too, or people who are vendors to libraries, like the Cengage Learning, you know, which includes Gale, or Houghton Mifflin. What are our sister industries that we can chat with our colleagues about libraries?
I think that's a really important point, because I think we can't be isolated and only
Right.
think about our world. I think we can learn. So for example, with the maker spaces, I think that's a whole new trend. I mean, it's been going on now
Yeah,
for some
yeah.
years, and it's requiring a new skill set, it's borrowing from others. And one of the things I was worried about with the maker space, and I think we can learn from others too, is that if we need to make it something that needs to be in a library, because otherwise it could be in a community center, so why
Right.
a library?
Right, exactly.
And I don't know if you have any feelings on that. I did see at this New England Library Association conference some presentations on librarians engaging with children and middle school children and younger children in doing science type projects with Legos and other things. And this isn't something right now that we're teaching in
Right.
our program, and I'm wondering what we can do to better prepare.
Yeah, I think that that's a good question about how do you kind of just do the pole vault leap and decide on what services you want and not spread yourself too thin. You know, the makerspace and music lab and whatever, depending on your size, but really to do a few things the best in the world and to really develop professional skills of people who know how to do it. For instance, Teen Central at the Boston Public Library, with help, financial support from the foundation, has really moved ahead on providing teens with skills in developing technology, like computer games and apps and that kind of thing. And it takes financial resources, but I think that's what really counts. Excuse me.
I know, because
Yeah,
you
I
had
think-
mentioned the space and the teen space. So I was
Right,
there
right.
recently for the Boston Book Festival, and they held several sessions in there. And the thing I really like about what's happening in the good library spaces now is how they really capture the group for whom they're intended. So you walk into the teen space and
Right.
you know you're in a teen space. You walk into the children's
Right.
space and you know. So how does that come about?
Well, you know, this is another thing, I think, that you bring your own personalities to your profession. So we really threw our hearts into the children's library. And so I just thought about being a mom when my kids were little, or now being a grandmother, and thinking, what do I want to see in a children's library? And I remember those like big chair and a half that where you'd plunk down and have spontaneous reading with your kids. So I don't think we should be shy about holding off on our personal preferences too. And with the teens, that was the one where the BPL team, I would say, was the least confident about how would that be successful. So we did a few things to make that work. The team turned to the teens and the teen librarians, and so they had a lot of ideas and suggestions which were implemented. We also then held back money in the budget. So after, a year, 6 months, oh, you need more pillows, or you need more computers, or something like that. You kind of watch how people are using it, and then you shore up the strengths, or you fix the weaknesses. So I think that's the other important thing, whatever the project is, but particularly building projects, just know that you're gonna do your best, and it's not gonna be perfect, so save some money so you can make it perfect.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. So who was gathering the data after the fact of what seemed to be working or not?
Well, we talked about in our meetings that, when you build a park and there's cute sidewalks and everything, and then there's a path that cuts across the
Yeah.
grass.
Yeah.
That's what you then have to look at, and the
Right.
teen librarians or me walking
Okay.
through or something,
Mhm.
you're just like, oh, okay, that should have been a sidewalk.
Right. Now, you mentioned that there's a team. Who was on the team as you were creating?
So, the Boston Public Library has, many of them are Simmons graduates, and they were on the team, but also we had great architects, William Ron and Associates. We had different people, like the teen librarians would come in at certain points, and then we had just leaders in the library who could think creatively, innovatively, could take a risk, could know about library science. So, and then we had people who kept us on schedule and budget, so it was quite a significant team, and it was just the best and brightest of BPL.
But it sounds like you actually brought the teens in to hear from them and the children.
Yeah, and the public.
The public.
It was very important that
Okay.
we had roundtables of updating people, both online and in-person roundtables. We also had suggestions where people could write what they wanted to see right in the lobby. So it was very essential to the success of the library that we turned to the community to see what they were interested in. And we also, the library has a special collections committee, because we very much thought the scholars should be involved and kept up to date and not feel threatened by what was happening with the children's library and the teen central, so that they didn't feel resources were being taken away from the scholarly aspects. There's a lot of people you have to please in the public library.
Yes, a lot of people with different interests and different backgrounds. Yeah, that is for sure. Unlike, well, yeah, I guess in every environment you have an academic library, you have undergrads and grads and faculty, but in the public.
Yeah, you have all those people plus.
Right, and especially, one of the things I know, so the central library where you've been doing all of the design, it's accessible on the T and buses.
Yes,
So people from all over Boston can come. It's not
exactly.
necessarily just the demographic group that can walk there,
Right,
for
right,
example.
and the Boston Public Library is also the library for the Commonwealth. And so it is mindful of that role, which is supported by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to really reach out to people throughout all of Massachusetts. But it's a worldwide resource.
Right, and some real jewels in terms of
Right.
collections, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. So we were talking about these various changes, and it actually sounds like our job is getting more complicated rather than simpler. I remember once Linda Smith from the University of Illinois was talking about the continuum reference, and you sort of referred to that, because it's not as though email references replaced face-to-face
Right.
or telephone. We keep adding ways to communicate, so.
Right,
that-
and nothing drops off.
And nothing is dropping off.
Right,
So
exactly.
that makes it difficult, because I know from having done reference services that you interact differently depending on the medium, because it just makes it easier or not.
it's
In
true.
your experience at the Boston Public, which way do people mostly reach out to the reference librarians now? Is there any preferred way?
Thanks to an alumni of Simmons, we got involved with LibGuides, so that's an important piece of it. Another is the librarian as a teacher, and so there's a curriculum development librarian who also supplies information to librarians to teach skills, technology skills. And so different ways like that, reaching out. And then people do want that face-to-face too.
Right, and yeah, the comment about teaching is very interesting, because I've been hearing that at first from academic library directors, when they said the graduates from your program need to know how to teach, and we don't mean user instruction, we mean
Yeah.
really know how to
Yeah.
teach, which then we thought, I thought, well, we've got a school library teacher program, and we
Yeah,
actually teach classes to that small group, so we're trying to see what we could move into there,
That's
into
a
that
great
general
idea,
program.
that's a great idea.
Because they said, they wanted to know about trends in education, the flipped classroom, how to communicate,
Yeah, oh,
program
that's
learning.
interesting, oh, that's
So I
great.
thought that would be good, but I think in public libraries as well, it's
Yeah.
important, especially with, and I think that's one of the makerspace.
Yeah,
Um,
it is. And
why?
librarians too, for teens and kids, they are real mentors too, and coaches and important figures in the lives of people who use the library, especially the young people.
So if you were going to give some advice on how to watch the trends, or what trends to watch so that we don't become obsolete, and how to sort of stay ahead of the curve, what would you recommend?
Well, I would be very proactive on what is happening with the world and what is happening with the demographics in your city. For instance, in Boston Public Schools, there's many, many different languages spoken. So how do you bring that back to a library, and what does that mean, particularly for the branches? So I'd look at your demographics. I also would think about the career choices in terms of helping people. Like, in the economic downturn in 08, 09, we really shored up on different career resources and finding aids. So I think that's an important piece, to really kind of scrutinize the needs and then to spot the trends by what's happening in the present. And then go to retail and the high-tech industries, I think, too, kind of the cutting-edge ones, and the consumer market, and depending on your age, listen to people younger than you, unless you're a baby.
So if you were working with, you have a large staff at a library like that, and there's staff in different branches, do you try to bring them together to brainstorm, to identify trends? I mean, what could we do better?
That's a good way. I don't know if they're doing that, but just to have like brainstorming sessions with libraries and then non-librarians too. I think that's probably a good idea. I think what really helped Boston Public Library is to have a strategic plan. It's called the Compass, with the principles for excellence too. So, because it can be overwhelming, and if you narrow it down to these 8 things, are what the Boston Public Library wants to aspire to, like values, innovation and technology, or children and families, and that kind of thing. So that it's just not flabby thinking, it's just like, okay, so now we're really gonna think about where we wanna be in terms of providing technological resources within the next 2 years. I think that works better than just kind of opening it up, having kind of a direction.
Yeah, and then when the strategic plan, the Compass, was developed, was there a lot of input from various constituencies, and was it a long process?
It was a long process. It took a couple years, and during that time there was that economic downturn, and we really felt the dearth of not having a completed strategic plan, because people would say, what are your priorities? And would say, well, we're working on them, and that always sounded a little mushy. So there were meetings, there were public meetings, there were surveys in libraries, and then we left surveys in non-library locations like places of worship and stores. Why don't you use the library? And so it was really comprehensive, and then there was a Compass committee of about 9 people or so too. And out of the principles, which are meant to last, then there are action plans, and those can change and evolve, but the principles stay the same. It's online at bpl.org.
Right.
So we put so much work into it that, by God, we are really gonna use it, yeah.
Yeah. So, if you're talking to people about why they don't use the library, because I know that we have library users, but we have, everyone's an information user, and you've often seen these diagrams. Everyone's an information user, and then it funnels down, and not everyone is a library user, and then in the library, not everyone consults a librarian. learn anything from the non-library users that, because I assume one of your goals would be to convert them into
Well,
library
yeah,
users, right?
and one thing that would annoy all of us is that they say, I don't use the library, I just use the databases.
Oh, and they don't understand
Right,
that they're actually
or
using
I don't use the library, I just go there to do my homework or something like that. So I
Okay.
think people underestimate kind of the reach of the library. I think too, what we found in East Boston too is new Bostonians who don't have the tradition of a public library in their home countries, sometimes are suspicious of government, intimidated by government. It's a foreign concept to them. So it'd be like, say to you, do you want to go to Venus? And you'd say, wow, I'm not sure, where's Venus? And, you know, do I need a
Right.
passport or something?
Right.
So I think we need to, again, look at who are we trying to serve and how do we meet them in their like settings, and then talk about the library, kind of back into it. And then, you know, and the growth of ebooks is tremendous. At Boston Public Library, for the downloadable resources, if that were a branch, that would be the highest circulating branch. So people are downloading books at home, and the growth is kind of moving out.
Now, you think the concept of free to all is still extremely important in the public library?
I think so too. You know, when you talk about maker spaces or something, there was one on Newbury Street that went out of business, but you know, the ones that are free are going gangbusters. And I think that's such a pillar of democracy for all of us to know that the library is free to all.
And that's something that even in the future and even
Right,
with change,
right.
we're gonna try to preserve.
Or some people say mistakenly, free for all. And sometimes it is a free for all,
Right.
but
Right.
carved and granite is free to all.
So I know I've sort of jumped around in the questions, but is there anything else related to the future of libraries, librarians that I didn't ask that you'd like to say?
Well, I would just suggest to library school students that they dream big, and that once they are in a position that they really bring to bear their hopes and dreams. And we always, I think seasoned librarians, I'll say to younger ones or new ones, let us learn from you. You have a unique voice in this setting, and I think administrators value that because, you know, they're running around and they're busy, so whether it's emailing the director, I'm sure you feel that too, or the dean, and, you know, just keep in touch, be present, and, you know, have fun.
Yeah, 'cause
It's a
I
great
think-
profession.
Yeah, it is a great profession, but something you said before is that, you know, we as professors here learn from our students.
Right.
And I think it's a good point to say that our recent grads go out and can not only learn from mentors, but
Oh,
also
yeah.
they can teach
Absolutely.
some of the new things that
I've always
they've
been proud
learned.
to see I'm a librarian.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you very much. This
Well,
has been
you're
a great
welcome.
talk.
It's
Look
my
forward to
pleasure.
doing it again.
Good, thank you.